Hey, this is Ervin Griffin, and welcome to part 9 of my series on the history of the Marvel superhero, the Black Panther. You have no need to know my true name, fool. For those who speak it, only do so in whispers, fearful whispers, lest they reach the ears of the Man-Ape. The Man-Ape, of course, is M'Baku. The other villain, well, somewhat villain in the movie Black Panther. Actually, his comic counterpart is much more villainous than the movie version was. The movie version actually was a bit of a fan favorite. But first I'm going to talk about the comic version, much like I did Killmonger, then talk about the movie version that we got, played by Winston Duke. M'Baku was born and raised in the Jabari village within the nation of Wakanda. He was one of the greatest warriors of the African nation, Wakanda, second only to T'Challa himself. Excuse me. While the Panther was on leave from his role duties to serve with the Avengers in America, the ambitious M'Baku plotted to upspur the throne. The Wakandan culture evolved from a hunter-warrior society and was traditionally ruled by its greatest warrior. The Black Panther outlawed the rival white gorilla cult from Wakanda while the Panther cult was dominant. M'Baku flouted T'Challa's edicts and revived the white gorilla cult, personally stalking and killing one of the rare white gorillas living in the jungles near Wakanda. Bathing in the gorilla's blood and eating the gorilla's flesh mystically conferred its great strength upon M'Baku. When the Black Panther returned to Wakanda with the Avengers, M'Baku, calling himself the Man-Ape, openly challenged the Panther's right to rule. He deplored T'Challa's technology revitalization of Wakanda and sought to have all technology outlawed so that the nation could return to, as to put it in my words, its natural state. This was also shown in the film as well, the beliefs of M'Baku. After a protracted battle, the Man-Ape actually bested the Black Panther. However, when he bound T'Challa to a giant statue of a panther and tried to topple it on top of him, the statue instead crumbled and buried M'Baku. The Black Panther, believing M'Baku dead, returned to New York with the Avengers. But M'Baku's chief supporter, Nagamo, revived the rebel. M'Baku then later followed the Panther to New York City. There, the Man-Ape allied himself with the Grim Reaper and his Lethal Legion, a short-lived team of Avengers foes, including the Living Laser, Power Man, not to be confused with the Luke Cage Power Man, and the Swordsman. The Man-Ape kidnapped Monica Lynn, who I discussed in an earlier chapter, and who was Black Panther's girlfriend at the time. And he used her to lure the Panther into captivity. When the rest of the Avengers came to the Panther's rescue, Captain America fought the Man-Ape and defeated him. The Panther decreed if Man-Ape returned to Wakanda, he would face the death penalty. Humiliated, the Man-Ape chose to wander to less civilized parts of the world, performing mercenary work to survive and keeping a low profile. He was eventually contacted again by the Grim Reaper, who was trying to assemble a new Lethal Legion to exact revenge on the Avengers. The Man-Ape served as one of the Grim Reaper's henchmen until the Reaper's racist attitudes towards the Man-Ape and people of color, as well as the attitude of fellow Legionnaire Black Talon, caused him to abandon the Reaper's cause. No, actually, let me rephrase that. Actually, Man-Ape and the Black Talon both abandoned the Grim Reaper's team because of the Grim Reaper's racist attitudes towards people of color. He later joined the 7th incarnation of the Masters of Evil, gathered by the Crimson Cowl, who turned out to be Justin Hammer. However, he was sucker punched by the Thunderbolts as they infiltrated the Master's base, having no part to play in the battle that followed. So basically, he was knocked on his behind while everybody else fought. M'Baku represented the Jabari tribe at the Pan American Congress on the treatment of superhumans, hosted in Wakanda in search of a consensus of how to react to the American Superhuman Registration Act. The representatives failed to reach an agreement before the Congress disbanded. This was during the Civil War story arc, which the main theme was between Captain America and Iron Man. This was, however, not played out much in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then, during an encounter with Morlun, who is traditionally an enemy of Spider-Man, he murdered the Man-Ape by sucking the life out of him and feeding him on his totem. Morlun, in case you're wondering, is a supervillain who mainly hunts Spider-Man and those with similar powers, but he also hunts anyone with an animal spirit. In other words, someone like the Black Panther can be followed, or even someone like Wolverine could be a target of Morlun. Later, Man-Ape reappeared alive and joined the Villains for Hire, assembled by the Purple Man, Kilgrave, for those of you that watch Jessica Jones, and the Headhunter, to build a criminal empire by selling their services to the highest bidder as opposition to the Heroes for Hire, which was, of course, ran by Luke Cage and Iron Fist. At some point in time, Man-Ape was imprisoned by S.H.I.E.L.D. in Pleasant Hill, a prison in the form of a small town where its inmates had their memories and appearances tampered with by a sentient cosmic cube named Kobik, so they could be turned into model citizens. M'Baku and a group of villains led by the Captain America enemy Baron Zemo snapped out of this fantasy and returned to their true selves. They attacked the village from within, wreaking havoc and freeing the other prisoners from the Pleasant Hills' control. When the bad guys took notice of the presence of the Avengers on the scene, they used their numbers to their advantage and mercilessly struck down the heroes. However, Kobik took compassion on the Avengers and healed them. M'Baku died yet again, this time under unknown circumstances, and the mantle of White Gorilla was taken up by his brother, Mandela, though he too eventually joined M'Baku in death. Baron Macabre raised M'Baku from the dead via an elaborate ritual and granted Man-Ape supernatural powers. However, Macabre believed the arrival of Kantu's mechanical drones were a bad omen. Thus, M'Baku soon cast the shaman aside for lacking faith in him and seemingly having already served his purpose. After that, Man-Ape was eventually dealt with from the efforts of the Black Panther, Kantu, and Shuri. Macabre stripped him of his newfound abilities and fled. Now, as for abilities, due to the ritual in which he killed a sacred white gorilla and bathed in its blood and consumed its flesh, Man-Ape possessed superhuman strength, enabled him to lift about 10 tons. In other words, he could go toe-to-toe with some of the lower-level strongest characters, such as the Amazing Spider-Man, Venom, but he would not be a match for the Hulk or Thor, or even the Fantastic Four's Thing. As for stamina, Man-Ape's advanced musculature produces less fatigue toxins during physical activity than the musculature of an ordinary human. He can physically exert himself at peak physical capacity for several hours before the buildup of fatigue toxins in his bloodstream begins to impair him. His agility, balance, and body coordination are enhanced to the levels of that beyond a natural physical limitations of even the finest human athlete. His reflexes are also very enhanced and superior to those of top-level human athletes. Man-Ape's durability is somewhat harder and more resistance to certain types of injuries than the body of an ordinary human, though he is far from invulnerable. Man-Ape's body is more resistant to blunt force and impact trauma than the body of an ordinary human. For example, he could withstand repeatedly being hit by a superhumanly strong adversary or falling from heights from several stories with little to no injury to show for it, whereas an ordinary human would be killed. Man-Ape is also a seasoned warrior and skilled hand-to-hand combatant. Since gaining his powers, he's become an even more formidable combatant. Now, that's the comic book Man-Ape. The one in the movie, while a skilled warrior and brawler, does not seem to be as evil as his comic counterpart. Likewise, he doesn't seem as invulnerable. Though definitely a very tough opponent, the movie version is toned down a bit, and they took the part about him killing and eating a white gorilla out of the equation. Though certainly the movie Man-Ape in the Black Panther is certainly no pushover, by no means. And he actually has a sense of humor. But yeah, that's the rundown on M'Baku, the Man-Ape. Which I should say on a side note, they only called him M'Baku in the movies, mostly because they wanted to avoid any stereotypical or racial backlash in calling him Man-Ape, even though he had been known as the Man-Ape for several years in the comic books. But I think that was a move more to appease those not familiar with the comic. So that's really all I got to say on this character. Now, the next 2 or 3 chapters, I'm going to focus on some notable allies of the Black Panther. Covered up with this notable ally, in which at one point he even took his place on his turf. Speaking of T'Challa. And all I will say is, T'Challa went to hell, so to speak.